Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2021. This is a 5-month mission I'm embarked on with a bunch of other booktubers where we're reading Star Trek fiction. So that's not nerdy enough for you. For the rest of 2021. We started in August with the original series, and in September we're doing The Next Generation, a formative Star Trek series for a great many people out there, including, I'd be willing to bet, a great many people who are listening who are watching this video, where this series holds more of a place in your heart or your ethical makeup than a simple TV series. I used to mock that, but I have come to understand a lot more about it in the course of this month, and I've done a lot of interesting reading. Nothing that really stands out as absolutely great. Maybe that's a function of my own affections. Maybe I can only see that in the original series novels that I really love. I have been looking for Star Trek The Next Generation novels that are really good on their own, that stand on their own, mainly because I found quite a few that don't. Quite a few that are thickly ensconced in the extended universe new worlds of TNG or the rest of the Star Trek universe in the books, detailing events from book to book that take place long after any movie or long after any series. And the books are written by different authors. They all just sort of share this stuff in common, and often don't bother to explain it to their readers. It seemed to me, when I read some of those books, that not only were they sharing those extended universe worlds in common, but that they were largely writing these books to each other. Which is a drastic defect for a book, right? If a book is written without the audience in mind, that's a huge defect. So I've been looking for TNG novels that would stand on their own, with minimal explanation, minimal nods in the direction of any ancillary learning that you have to bring to it. And one of the little theories that I've been pursuing while I've been doing that is, will you have a higher percentage of novels that do that are written by professionals? Which isn't to say that somebody who gets a Star Trek brief from Pocket Books or whatever isn't a professional. Of course, they have a published book, and, kudos to them. I'm sure their mother is proud. But I mean people who write books. With Star Trek books, you have a built-in audience, right? You know already that they're there, and you know that they are going to fill in any blanks that you leave open. And you might go into your writing brief saying, well, okay, but even so, I'm not going to leave any blanks open because that's bad writing. But you're going to have that in the back of your mind always. And if it's your first book, or your second book, or your first real money book, it's not going to be possible for you to write without knowing that your audience is going to meet you more than halfway. And that leads to the kinds of TNG novels that I'm talking about that haven't been all that enjoyable for me. Not only because I haven't read a lot of the extended universe that they're relying on, but also because I'm a professional critic. I look at those things and immediately say, all right, well, this isn't successful at all. You're alluding to something without explaining at all in any way, not just at the beginning of your book, but at any point in your book, what it is. You're expecting me to know what it is, and that isn't something you're supposed to do as an author. I have often wondered, a pet theory that I have been developing is that professional writers, people who have writing briefs elsewhere in the writing world, won't be as likely to do that as so-called Star Trek writers will. So every once in a while in my TNG journey in September, I have been looking for novels written by pros. People who've written, sold, and even sold a lot of books that have nothing to do with Star Trek. And I found one for today. I found one last night, and I read it. It's one that I remember selling in the bookstore. But I never read it at the time. But it is by a pro. It's by S.P. Somtow, an author we've seen on this channel for, I think, his big werewolf novel, Moondance. But he's written a ton of science fiction under a bunch of different names. And he wrote a book for TNG called Do Comets Dream, following in the long-standing tradition of Star Trek naming episodes, or I guess novels, with question marks. I remember seeing this in listings and in the bookstores and thinking, well, how good a book can it be if the answer to the title question is no? Right? If the title question is just is a yes or no question and the answer is obviously no, comets are hunks of rock, so they don't dream, then how good can the book be? And I don't think I was all that tempted by S.P. Somtow by his name on the book. Because I kept remembering, I've known a couple of people who've written Star Trek novels, who've got that job based on a huge amount of, I don't know, YA stuff that they've written, or tech journal stuff outside the fiction writing industry. In other words, based on a CV that allows them to go to a publisher and say, look, I can meet the word deadline. You're not going to have any problems with me. And those authors have uniformly told me that when they get back the finished copy of their book, they barely recognize their own prose until the thing is 70 or 80 pages old, because there's such a heavy corporate handprint on the whole thing. And of course, Pocket and Paramount reserve all the rights to rewrite your work. If they want something redone, they're not going to send it back to you for edits. They're just going to fix it themselves. And so I think originally that combination, that do Comets dream? No, they don't. And also, yes, S.P. Somtow's name is on the cover, but how much of it will feel like him? I think those two things sort of put me off this from reading it originally. I read it last night, and I was going into it wondering, have you actually read this and you've just forgotten? And I don't think I have read this. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's the regular Enterprise D characters. This is not edging out into the unknown territory between movies. This is very much on the Enterprise D's original 5-year mission. And it has a callback to a character that I guess is a fan favorite in TNG, the character of Simon Tarses, a young man in, I think the episode's name is The Drumhead, a young man who has passed himself off as half Vulcan in order to get into Starfleet and serve on board the flagship of the Federation. But it's the actual truth comes out that he is half Romulan. And it's a good acting turn by the young actor who plays him in the show. I understand why it would lodge with a lot of people. That's also, if that's the episode I'm thinking of, that's also a very powerful episode on its own. It wouldn't matter whether or not Simon Tarses was in it or not. He crops up in this novel and is dealt with in a very intelligent way. And the Enterprise is dealing with a number of different forces here, one of which is a planetary civilization that they've made diplomatic contact with the Federation. But they believe that every 5 years, their entire civilization is completely wiped out, and it has to be regenerated entirely. They've built not only a society, but a religion around that. And they say that the bringer of death and rejuvenation, the thing that kills them, is this fiery object in the sky. The science crew on board the Enterprise obviously knows this is just a comet. And it's easy enough to destroy the comet. The Enterprise can do it with a minor calibration of either its phasers or its photon torpedoes. S.P. Somtow comes up with both in the course of this book. I think probably he means to stick with phasers and just didn't do it. And so, Picard and his crew are brought right up against the Prime Directive. What do you do with these people? You're in diplomatic contact with them, so you can actually talk to them about the realities of the broader universe. And one of those realities is that this is not a religious item at all. This is just a comet. And you might not have the technology to stop your whole civilization from being wiped out in a few days, but we do. we can destroy the thing so that you don't even have to think about it again. And it of course, I should have expected more S.P. Somtow. He's all over this book, and the way he's a wonderful fantasy and science fiction writer, and somebody who chases down every implication of every idea that he comes up with. And he does that in this book, and it's wonderful. Of course, if you have a civilization like that, that's destroyed, wiped out every 5 years by a magic item in the sky, you're going to have a huge percentage of your population that wants it to be that way. As weird as that looks to outsiders, that wants it to be that way, that yearns for that on religious grounds. And they're not going to want you to destroy that comet, even if it means they get to live. And all of that, every permutation of that is dealt with, and none of the characters are cardboard cutouts. The character who is, who in a weaker novel would be the stand-in religious zealot is actually three-dimensional. The cardboard character who in another novel, a weaker novel, would be the cardboard cutout rebel is actually three-dimensional. Simon Tarses is actually three-dimensional. And Somtow also uses in this book a tried-and-true Star Trek narrative gimmick, which is to have a newcomer be your visual focal point. There's a young man who won an essay contest. He's from Norway. He's very familiar with I felt like it was in saga long because he's very familiar with the sagas of the Vikings, and he's extremely familiar with the figures of the Federation. He views this Picard's Marquis bridge crew, not Marquis, but Marquis bridge crew. I got to stop doing that. His Picard's famous bridge crew he views as living legends. He knows everything about them. He has their trading cards, and he is on the Enterprise for a shakedown. Just as a visitor. Of course, the action is going to involve him a lot more than just being a witness. But because he's a witness at the beginning, because he's somebody with an entirely new set of eyes, that's wonderful. That gives Somtal a broad range of opportunities to talk about the crew in a way that, for instance, if he had made that focal point Simon Tarses would never have any reason to expound on the wonder of Commander Data or the bad temper of Commander Worf. He would never have any reason to do that. Whereas this guy does. This new he's not even a cadet. He's not old enough for Starfleet Academy. He is a good focal point for that. And I'm not going to spoil this book for you, but it's not going to be any kind of a spoiler to any Star Trek fan that it doesn't turn out to be a normal comet. I mean, you knew that, right? You saw that coming a mile away. It's not just a normal comet. We learned that fairly early on. And Somtal does a great job. With everything on board the Enterprise, with the personal problems, the personal conundrums that come up for Simon Tarses, and also imagining this world. Totally brings you into this world in a way that quite a few Star Trek novels don't. Even though Star Trek is all about seeking out new worlds and new civilizations, quite a few of them do a very lackluster job fully imagining the alien world, the alien society. And Somtal doesn't at all. He does a fantastic job. I'm sorry that I let this go originally, because I don't remember even if this came out in hardcover originally. Somtal was a professional writer, had a long career, nominated for lots of industry awards. I think he had quite a few hardcovers under his own name. So I can't remember if they actually brought this out as a hardcover first, if this exists as a hardcover at all. I vaguely want to say it came out originally as a trade paperback, but I could be wrong about all of that. I wasn't paying close attention, and now I am. Now I have read, as we wind down the next generation here on Book Trek, I've read another TNG novel that I really, really liked. Something, in fact, that I could easily imagine rereading. So that's good. That your report for today is entirely positive. And I'm going to go on. I do this every night. I do a randomization. Random number generator is what you would call it if I had any ability to do that. Instead, I just flick at random with my eyes closed and come up with another TNG novel. I've got a ton of these things as ebooks. Thank God. I can only imagine how much. I'm fighting for shelf space as it is. I can only imagine how much shelf space I would lose if I had all these things in paperback. But I'm gonna look at random for another one. I know, of course, I'm going to end this month with the novelization of All Good Things, the final episode of The Next Generation. The Next Generation was the first Star Trek incarnation that knew exactly when it was going to end, that knew what its last episode was, and could, write accordingly. The original series didn't know that. Star Trek Enterprise vaguely knew that, but they had a lot of other plans that they didn't get to do. But all the other Star Treks, it's presumed that your syndication deal will be locked in place by season 3, and you will know when your final episode is. So that'll be the last TNG novel that I read for September, but there are a few days in between now and then. So I will wrap this up for now, and we'll go on to another one, picked at random, tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.